Hello everyone! Welcome to our video series on bringing formative assessment to life in Edmonton Catholic Schools. As you've seen in our first video of the series, formative assessment is a cycle in which teaching is responsive and learning is informed, thereby improving the learning of our current students. Formative assessment then has two components: assessment for learning, in which teacher uses student learning information to guide their instruction and provide feedback for the purpose of improving learning, and assessment as learning, in which the student is owning their learning, they're reflecting, monitoring their progress, and implementing the feedback that they receive from their peers and from their teacher to move their learning forward. Let's recap what we learned in our first video, Dylan Wiliam's 5 key strategies for formative assessment, which support teachers and students in knowing where the learner is going, where the learner is now, and how to get the learner there. The 5 strategies are clarifying and sharing and understanding the learning intentions, eliciting evidence of learning, providing feedback that moves learners forward, activating students as learning resources for one another, and activating students as owners of their own learning. As you watch this second installment of this video series, consider the following questions. In what ways does the lesson demonstrate one or more of Wiliam's 5 strategies for formative assessment? What features of the learning environment and classroom culture do you think contribute to the success of the lesson? How might you already allow for collaborative learning in your classroom? And what opportunities do you see for increasing collaborative learning in your classroom? Last time, Selena and Byron shared their experience as learners in a collaborative classroom, and today we will hear from their teacher about how she uses classroom collaboration to elicit evidence of learning while also supporting student learning.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Mickelson. I teach at Archbishop MacDonald High School, and I currently have sections of Math 10C and some 30-1, 30-2. So today we were doing an introduction to using the volume formulas for calculating three-dimensional object volume. And grade 10s have a little bit of experience with this from junior high. They've seen these objects before. And so what we do is we break them into some small groups, and then we give them sets of problems. Each of the sheets I started with something they've seen before and something that's algebraically not as difficult. And then you just sneakily ease in the new stuff, and they get into a flow where they're sort of following the same rhythm or steps that they've used before to solve a more challenging problem. So these are things like if they have the culture built where they have a problem and they just have to work together to come up with different theories they can test to try and solve it, they're kind of like using this task as a way to construct the knowledge that they're going to need to further the development of that concept throughout the chapter.
So going back to what you said before, you said if the culture is built.
Yeah. So the beginning of the semester, the first bunch of classes that we have together are always up where they're standing at these whiteboards, and they're always in random groups. But if we put them with new people, every class, they're kind of forced to get out of that label or that comfort zone, and everybody has to contribute. And that's sort of how we build the culture. So they get used to working with different people. They get used to writing things and communicating like verbally and on surfaces so that other people can see what's happening. And they get used to sharing ideas by looking across the room and seeing, like, if my group is stuck but the group over there has something written on their board, like, oh, well, what did they do? And then they can use that as a Kickstarter if they're stuck. We can build this, I guess, a feeling of trust or like mutual respect, because I can have a conversation directly with them about what they were thinking of doing. So that, I think, collectively is just good formative assessment practice.
What is it that you're doing while they're doing all of that group work?
You are actively walking around and listening and looking at their boards and checking for common mistakes. And if you see something that multiple groups are doing, like, that's an automatic, okay, we need to pause, we need to stop, we need to talk about this one little adjustment that might need to be made, or this one misunderstanding that multiple groups are having. and then you can set them loose again. So it kind of shows you what the gaps are in their understanding and like directs what you want to focus your teaching on the next day. It's just giving you that instant feedback. So you're not sitting at your computer and like, you know, marking a batch of tests. Like you have to be involved and see what they're doing. I will ask them some prodding questions and see if they can figure it out. So I'll like give them maybe a hint or two and then I'll kind of walk away. And if I come back and they're still struggling, then I usually like hook them up with another group and just say, can you explain what you did in this situation? And then it's like group teaching instead of them relying on me, because there's 35 of them and there's one of me. So if multiple students know how to do this and they can explain it, that's just going to solidify that learning for them, and it's going to help the groups that are struggling. I can help you and be a resource for you, and you can help me if I'm stuck. The group work is really good for them to figure out, like, where do I stand right now? How much of this concept do I know? What do I still need to work on? How can I improve? So when I started, every class was me teaching examples, or if we had a day where there was some free time, they might do some practice problems on like a worksheet. So boring, like so boring. And it took me a long time to realize that that was boring for me. And if it's boring for me, then it must be boring for them. So it was worth the risk of trying something new. And it was a risk at the beginning, but I just had to try. But I've tried it in multiple places and I've tried it at multiple grade levels, and every one of those students, even the ones that on paper are like, I hate group work, they like this group work because it's not like there's a grade tied to it. And like just academically, like I said, if I can see on paper what they're doing every day and what they're thinking every day, then I know that they're thinking something and they can't just hide at their desk in the back, and so that holds them accountable now. Like they have to do some thinking, and then they become more successful achieving all the curriculum criteria that are laid out for us because I make them do it. I'm sneaky, but I've done this now with like 14 different classes. They're all success stories, I would say. Like not one of those classes would I look back on and say, oh, I really should have just stuck with the old system. If we can't make them engaged in their own learning during the day, like they're certainly not going to go home and do 3 hours of math homework every night. So if they're not going to think in this classroom, they're not going to think ever. So I needed to change.
We'd like to extend a special thanks to Ms. Jocelyn Nicholson at Archbishop MacDonald High School for welcoming us into her classroom and sharing her story. If you'd like to learn more about formative assessment or some of the techniques that Jocelyn used in her classroom, you can check out these two books, Embedded Formative Assessment by Dylan Wiliam and Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics by Peter Liljedahl. You can also listen to the podcast Cult of Pedagogy, specifically the episode Making Cooperative Learning Better. And of course, as always, you may visit the Assessment and Reporting SharePoint site. If you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to your assessment and reporting consultant at Lumen Christi. I'm Jennifer, signing off and saying thanks for watching and have a great day.